The Federal is organizing the Tenkasi Marathon 2024 on March 24. This marathon is about raising awareness for 100% voting, supporting breast cancer awareness, and celebrating International Women's Day month. This event is sponsored by Anayam Scan.
Hello and welcome to The Federal. You're watching Off the Beaten Track, a program in which we take a 360-degree view of an issue about which we are feeling very strongly at that particular time. 31% of Indians are below the age of 18. 25% of Indians are below the age of 14, which means a fairly large number, and we should be spending a lot of our public discourse time on children, whether what is going on in society does affect them adversely or not. As everybody would say, they are after all the nation's future. So are we taking adequate care of the future? I'm going to be focusing on something very specific. At any given point of time, the entertainment industry is beaming all kinds of programs and films with a large number of children in it. There are game shows, there are reality shows, there are all kinds of shows. You also have a very peculiar genre which has just started. You already had for a long time, for several decades, children being featured in various commercial advertisements. I'm sure that all of you can recall, if you just sit for 5 minutes, you'd be able to recall several iconic advertisements with children, whether be it for chocolate or even for products, which are actually consumed primarily by the adults. But a new genre has come into the market, or rather the industry, that is political advertising. To market a leader or market a political party, children are being used as models, as actors. So what all do we have to be talking about? What should be our concern areas? I am going to be talking about this with Shantha Sinha, who is first and foremost a very leading political scientist of the country. She's been an anti-child labor activist for several decades. She was also the first ever chairperson of the National Commission for Protection of Child Rights. She had, in fact, 2 terms, won the Magsaysay Award, and also is a Padma Shri. Welcome to this program, Shantha Sinha. It's really a privilege to talk to you, and that too about an issue in which I'm sure that you're going to speak from your heart.
Thank you, Nilanjan.
When you were a part of the National Commission for Protection of Child Rights, at that point, some guidelines were issued as to how the children should be treated in the entertainment industry. Since then, the entertainment industry has moved a long distance, and so have the guidelines also been tweaked. Quote unquote, if I can quote a newspaper article which said that they have been liberalized, meaning that it has been made easier to make the children perform as child performers in these advertisements.
Right.
But let's begin with what is going on in the name of political advertising and the use of children. Very recently, we are in the election season. Very recently, the government of India launched a series of television advertisements as well as for radio, which actually advertise the good work done by the government and the Prime Minister Narendra Modi. The concept of the Narendra Modi ki guarantee or the Modi ki guarantee was actually promoted through several of these videos where you had child actors, children going to school, for instance, in one of them, going to wish the grandfather that I'm going to school. The grandfather said, Ayushman Bhava. Goes to the grandmother, also says, Ayushman Bhava. Then the child asks in the child's voice, and it is a voiceover, that I have somebody to wish me Ayushman Bhava. Who will wish my grandparents Ayushman Bhava? Scratches his head and says, oh, Modi ji. And then goes the entire jingle and entire whatever is to be said. I'm sure that you would have seen this advertisement ad nauseum in the last several weeks. They hopefully might now stop because the model code of conduct has come into place after the elections are announced. Political advertising, commercial advertising, entertainment, game shows, reality shows. Let's listen from you, Shantha Sinha. I have spoken for a fairly long time. Your first thoughts on this some issue which actually gets excluded from our public discourse.
Yes, thank you for raising this issue. In fact, I saw it just a couple of minutes ago, and I found, as a common citizen, that it is so harmless. It is so benign. What's wrong with it? The young, smart girls and boys wearing a school uniform, touching the feet of the grandmother, and the grandmother blesses, and then finally the boy says, "My God, who will take care of my grandparents?" And then they say, "Of course, there is this Modi ji." And then it shifts to Modi ji Sarkar,
Right.
and what's wrong with it? That is the kind of a message that comes across. But it is so subtle and so clever, and we will have to unravel the inner meanings of everything. We can't be citizens without thinking, and what long-term impact it will have on children, what long-term impact it will have on society, and on what kind of a system, political system, you're envisaging for the future. When you look at the children themselves, you will find that they are being targeted and used as instruments for a goal. They are not actually end in themselves. And this is what all commercial uh, products are about. You just mentioned about it, that the toy or whatever the children are playing with are instruments for you to make your profit. You're not talking about children and happiness as much as selling a product. And this looks like you're selling a product. It's actually no different from any entertainment, any commercial advertisement where you're marketing a product and that product is Modi ji. And then because you cannot go to the court on it in a way, because it talks about Modi ji Sarkar, Modi ji becomes an adjective, starts as a noun and becomes an adjective as
And
Modi ji.
and the worrying thing is possibly you also cannot criticize this because after all, government programs which are quote unquote for the good of the people are being promoted, people are being made aware of
Uh,
it.
right. So in a way, the first thing is that the child is an instrument from a child rights perspective, and child is not an end in itself, and the child's voice is used to market a product. Now, there is a point here. The next thing is how harmful is this product that you're marketing
Right.
for the society, for the child, and what are you selling? Firstly, I think in doing so, you're converting a citizen into a subject who will be a beneficiary, who will be beholden to a leader who's going to bless you and take care of you. We are living in a democracy. We are not living in an autocracy. We're not living in a feudal empire. We're not leading emperors. So, in a way, you're sending a message to the child that you're not a citizen, you're a subject.
Right.
You're sending that message to the adult. You're sending it to you and we who are watching that. Look, we're all being converted from citizens to subjects. And that is totally unacceptable. It is so subtle that tomorrow you will think that this country cannot be run without a ruler.
Right.
But we know that our great country is the rulers are ourselves, you and me, those who have voting rights, those who have put people into power.
We
So
are the ones
it
who
has a strong ideological content. And in fact, it numbs a child into not being having any critical thinking and capacity and acceptance in the long run. So in a way, it's such an influencer kind of an advertisement, which can harm the children and harm the society as a whole. So I was thinking it was a very shocking advertisement, which is anti-democratic, which projects a leader, and the leader is marketed, and which has so many implications for governance and democracy.
right. And this is not the only advertisement. There are a large number of them, on similar lines. Now, let me move on a bit. The NCPCR, which I was talking about, when you issued some guidelines. Now, those guidelines were tweaked last year, in the month of May by the new, commission which is there. So one of the points which they said, that producers of audiovisual media production or commercial event will be able to involve a child participant only after obtaining permission from the district magistrates. Now it lays out very clearly, you have not been part of the government in the formal sense of it, but as having been chairperson of the commission, you have actually seen how the government works and how privileges come into government functioning. So do you actually envisage, this advertisement might in all probability have been made by a private advertisement company. Do you envisage that, for something like this, actually any clearance would have been taken?
I don't think so. I would not think not it for an advertisement like this, for any of the entertainment programs that you're talking about. I
Right.
don't think they would have asked for any permission. In fact, what the NCPCR was trying to say when I was there is that let us not have interference of any government because it is not practical. That we will have to have a system, especially when you're dealing with the media, something called self-regulation. There is something called a freedom of speech, freedom of thought, freedom of expression, and we have to respect the media for it. And we'll have to do a lot of awareness with the media on the consequences of what will happen to children if they're used the way they are in entertainment programs without protecting them. So we will have to maintain a kind of a standard and talk to the media, telling them that this is not on. In fact, what I'm saying is not something original. This is what has happened in many of the European countries where they decided that the media will have to be sensitized. And they had faith in the media who will listen, and who will do a peer watch on where it has been misused. So that was a framework in which one, in fact, did all the guidelines in the commission and not having a uh, uh, overseeing authority or power of the government in any case on the media.
Right.
That was the purpose at that.
Now, let me play the role of the devil's advocate. There are these game shows, there are these reality shows where competitive, uh, you know, competitions are actually held between various children, be it dancing, be it singing,
Sure.
various other kind of things going on at any given point of time in every language in India. On
Absolutely.
television, at least one
Right.
program or the other is running, featuring even during exams. We are in the middle of the exam season. You have the board exams of the 10th and the 12th also running simultaneously. Yet you have children specific programs, children computer singing.
Right, right.
You'd also be drawing a fair amount of children as audience, besides, of course, adults also watching it. So the argument is that competitiveness has always been an integral part of growing up. Even in schools, we have competitions. Even we have sporting competitions, we have cultural theater, singing. You have all kinds of competitions. So, what is the harm if we are actually taking it at one time to a much bigger audience? This is the argument which was actually made by somebody I know who's part of the entertainment industry. How do you react to an argument like this?
I think it is quite an absurd argument. There is no comparison between the kind of competition you will have in a school where the audience is live and you're meeting your friends and the spirit is entirely different. There are school sports, school dramatics, school elocution, school debates. They are in a spirit of sportsmanship, let me say. And they're all not among strangers, but among one's own peers. And then you laugh at it, and of course you're disappointed. But there's no insult, there is no public humiliation. In this kind of a media, you are subject to an audience whom you don't know, and they can be running into thousands and lakhs, and you're going to be insulted. I have watched some of these programs where the child is outright insulted and the child is in tears, and even those who are the judges, they also fall into tears that the child has not performed and had promise of performing. So let us not compare the competitive spirit that we talk about in a school with the competitive spirit that you talk about here, and the kind of practice, the kind of pressure that the parents put in the kind of pressure for achievement, for visibility, for investment in that child, they're totally different. Let me tell you that it's incorrect to compare what is happening in the social media, this kind of a media, with what is happening in schools. Although I know there are many schools who even think even this kind of competition is wrong and they will not support this. I would also go into that extreme, or not extreme, that ethical position that it has to be non-competitive space and not a competition. There is an argument in that where say that the best doesn't then come out. That because there is competition, then children performance improves and there is the best that comes out. Now you look at the values that are the underlying values when you're talking about it. And I think values are far more important. Comrade, friendliness, love, togetherness, a pride of a different kind of being together. I think those values are all lost.
Okay.
So what do we want? What do we want our children to think? Yes, excellence, but excellence can be achieved through other means, need not necessarily mean only through competition, which is what our society has not discovered, that excellence can be happening through other ways also.
Now, I would like to understand from you that as far as the child is concerned who enters one of these competitive game shows, what is the negative impact that happens on the child's, emotional growth, on the curriculum also, on the school education?
No, the kind of effort the child puts in, and then, as I told you, an exposure to an audience like this, how much of insult and humiliation and harm it causes, it scars the child for good. How is the child going to overcome it unless there is another opportunity to go in front of this large masses to say, look, I am a success story? Why put the child through all this agony? And I think it's totally unethical. It has to be banned. But as I said, banned. I said because it is media, it has to be discussed and through self-regulation. But it has now gone to such an extreme. I think we need a lot more public discourse on the issue. It is so important not to subject a child to this, and the larger atmosphere has pushed in the parents to this achievement syndrome on every issue, on 10th class, on intermediate, on making it to medical college, engineering college. What are these parents about? And what is this competitive capitalist framework that in which we are operating? I think we have to question it at a larger level as well.
Child performers in the entertainment industry is nothing new, even from the time of at least, our childhood, you would, a few years elder. We have grown up with child artists in Indian cinema, virtually in every language.
Right.
There are all kinds of stories that one keeps on hearing, that it has negative impact on the adult life of these children who taste success very early in life. When they grow up, they're not able to perform and actually get glory the way they did. And there are all kinds of problems which happens. Of course, there are some jobs, odd characters who were extremely successful even as popular Hindi cinema actors. I know at least about Hindi cinema because that is the primarily language in which I have watched Indian cinema. But can you explain to people, to who are watching this program, that what happens to a child who has actually put through this process, either as an entertainer or for the competition also? Let's not also just forget, I just want to say that even a competition is nothing but an entertainment.
I must tell you that I won't name the actor, but I had conversation with two of them who were
not taking names, in fact.
Yeah, but to tell you that it is authentic, with two of them with whom I did have this conversation about their childhood and about how much they enjoyed being visible and working in the film industry, and both very successful persons. And they said that if there is anything that they would like to relive their past, they would not like to live the way they did as child artists and as very successful uh, actors that they became in the future. They said they had no childhood, they said they had no friends, they said they had no school, they had no holiday, they worked hard, and in fact, they were the main persons who earned, the family lived on their earnings. In fact, and entirely dependent when they had to really play and have a peer group and enjoy. They were doing nothing of that sort, but burdened with the responsibility of performing and then going ahead, and also of being punished for not doing properly. They were not allowed, they had no freedom, it was total unfreedom. So when I heard their stories, even if those two were exceptional stories, I think they should not have happened. So this is what I think, and they regret it. They regret their past. So I think this is what happens when you don't have a childhood, when you don't have a nostalgia. What do you? We all grow up on our nostalgia. How we lived as children with uncles, aunts, with friends, and whatever. But these people had only lights
That's
and scripts.
that's true. In fact, one has heard many stories, read about it in the media about families having exploited the children who became very good performers as young children in cinema. Now, to a certain extent, I'm just trying to ask with you. We have spoken about families exploiting children to promote them in the entertainment industry. Child labor is also another related matter.
Yeah.
It might be, we might be said, that you're possibly stretching things too far by bracketing these children as child labor, along with them. But let us actually leave that aside, whether they are actually child labor or not. But I want to draw your attention to a slight change in the child labor laws which was done. I'm sure that you are aware of this, much
Right, right.
like that. 2015, this present government permitted children below 14 years of age to work only to work in family enterprises, or and also the entertainment industry.
Yeah.
Now, when you say that work in the family and industry, family enterprise, essentially is this also not some kind of, the government is enabling the exploitation of children by employing them in their own house factories? That is a time when children should not be doing what the parents are doing. Instead, they should be actually going out and getting educated so that they can grow out of a stagnating vocation that in which their parents are trapped in. Is this not something that the government should not, have done at all?
Absolutely, I entirely agree with you. It's completely, I think, unacceptable and unethical to have children work before and after school hours in the name of protecting culture, tradition, in the name of helping the family to income. I think it is, in fact, perpetuating child labor because their performance, this is total exploitation. And if they do not have the leisure and the time before in school hours to be children, they're bound to drop out during in school and join the labor force. It's total exploitation, and it's a question of children's rights, and it is violence on children. Get them to work before and after school hours, and we opposed it strongly. We said this is totally unacceptable. But I think somewhere the establishment in the country does not understand children's rights,
Okay.
especially about poor children. And they are all the time willing to give a concession for the children to actually drop out of school and exclude them from education. So I would say that when we are discussing especially child labor, we have to discuss right to education. We have to discuss education till completion of 12th grade, and which I feel the country should commit for. It's a fundamental right, but we have failed miserably in this.
the use of children in advertising to sell commercial products and now to sell a political leader or a political party.
Hmm.
I'm using the word to sell. Basically, you're trying to market, an idea. I was also, reading an interview by somebody who had been a very successful child artist and in adult life was not such a great successful uh, performer, said, that there was a basic one point which came across is that there was a constant amount of pathos while talking about the childhood because this person said that I was actually robbed of my childhood.
Yeah.
Now, I'm just trying to understand that what happens to the children who, say for instance, these children who are participating in these advertisements, be it commercial advertisements, when they go back to school, what happens? How do their peer groups, how do they respond to them? Is that person looked at some kind of a star, or is there some kind of an, acute jealousy or, trying to isolate that person? What happens?
I'm really not very familiar with what happens as a consequence of a child getting back to the peer group. I can only imagine what could have happened.
Yes,
The
I
way
would
you
like
have,
you to imagine, what
yeah, the way you have just mentioned, where how the child finds it so difficult to adjust. And it is a problem of adjustment from the child's end and also from the friend's end on how do you treat this new relationship when you get back. And perhaps it takes a long time for gaining confidence or for feeling very wanted. It must be a very troublesome experience for the child and could lead to insecurity, could lead to not having friends enough, or could lead to something where you're above, placed above an aura and
right.
not as an equal friend where they can play with. Anything can happen. I really can't imagine good things happening uh, in this integration when you come back. Perhaps it will take time to do that, but immediate consequences may not be as rosy as one would like it to be. It's just not possible. I mean, we are human beings after all. The child is a human being, the friend is also a human being.
That's right.
Even now, when you find there is a successful person among your classmates, even as elders, you find that if, because you're successful, the other classmate feels intimidated to come to you and say hello to you.
Right.
If that can happen with adults, you can imagine what it can do to a child in terms of being intimidated. And a child who's come back doesn't want to have a friend who's feeling intimidated, but they have no control over that. So we
Right.
will have, it isn't a normal relationship for some time.
There are a couple of thoughts, which I'm trying to combine together. One is, of course, I'm just trying to say, that uh, children have interaction with very limited number of adults in their
Yeah.
life. I'm talking about the average child. It's actually adults within the family, relatives, uh, friends, parents, their relatives, and that's about all. Teachers, of course, in school. So that is limited. What I see among the few occasional, episodes of these game shows that I've seen, there is one very similar one ploy which is used by these game shows to hype up and to increase the emotional quotient of the show. It is that you have the child on the stage, there's a spotlight on the child, suddenly the stage becomes absolutely, vacant. There is no one. So and so they take his name and the anchor says, "We have a surprise for you. Look there." And there's a spotlight on a particular part of the entire studio which is there. And in walks one of the parents, either the mother or the father or both parents. It becomes a very emotional moment,
Absolutely.
controlled emotion, because they are possibly being told that this is what we are going to do. So there has to be a certain amount of enactment. Yet the point is that when the children are there in these participating in these shows, their access to the parents is reduced, because there is no way that it is possible to have a game show and then have the parents also staying with them. So they are possibly kept somewhere or the other, in a hotel or somewhere, sharing rooms, make new friends. All those are very difficult things. Making new friends is not very easy. I know the number of children who have been paranoid about the father or the mother getting transferred from one city to another and then having to shift schools and make new friends. That is the biggest.
Right.
So, what really happens if you get exposed to too many adults who are not part of your core group and you are going to see them only for 1 month or maybe 15 days? What happens to the child when they are not in touch with the adults they are most comfortable with?
I think again, I go back to the original. I mean, the whole game show is again an instrument of entertainment. Who cares for what the child is thinking or what happens to the child? You're looking at the audience and what the audience thinks. So, the child, of course, is confused. Child, of course, feels uncomfortable. Child, of course, wants to perhaps even run away from the show, but then feels so much of issue of prestige that once you've jumped in, you have to go through it, sail through it, rather than run away. That kind of pressure is immense on the child. And I think, again, one has to be sensitive to what the child feels. And these kinds of situations should not emerge at all in their life. And why do they have to do this to the child?
Right.
I think it's very incorrect. But whoever cares for what the child feels or wants, that's not the purpose of any of the entertainment. Any commercial advertisement, any show that is for profit, the child is not the end at all. Child is a means, it's an instrument, and it's a target. So how does it matter what the child feels as far as you feel stacked up your pockets?
Right.
So it's a sad, very sad situation. I'm glad you asked this question. I'm not. I in fact heard somebody asking me this question. I'm also stumped at what you just said. But I think it's so important that we have child at the center when we are actually dealing with.
Have child at the center. I think that is a very major comment, a point which you have actually made. One last question, a hypothetical one. Suppose you once again become the chairperson of the NCPCR. It is not practically possible in the today's political atmosphere in India, but hypothetically, you are in that chairperson seat once again. What is going to be your stance towards the entertainment industry, the way it has grown since 2013 when you were there, between then and now, a decade later, and the new genre of political advertising also, in which children have been thrown in? What are the recommendations will you make?
Certainly, on the new genre of political advertisements, I'm sure one would have to, in fact, ask it to be withdrawn, because it is against law also. In terms of, there's no specific law on this, but let me get back to it. But in terms of children's rights, I think it is not correct to use children as influencers, because that is so important that we cannot utilize children and that it has to be withdrawn. And I'll make a plea for it to be withdrawn immediately. I mean, that I would do. And the other question on entertainment, I think there has to be, one would have asked for strong public debates, public discourses with children, with parents, with media, everyone. Because again, I strongly feel that there has to be a social environment, a norm set. Law alone will not help. Under the circumstances of creating a norm in favor of children, I think changes can happen. And as a commission, one would like to use the commission for projecting the issue of what violence there is in the entertainment industry for children.
Well said, Shantha Sinha, and thank you very much. You really said that it needs to be brought out in the open, needs to be debated, discussed, and the Commission should definitely move towards trying to get political advertising withdrawn. I hope that through this conversation, we have at least initiated a new round of debate and discussion on the use of children, which is really becoming very, very widespread and really disturbing. So
Yeah.
we have initiated this. I hope that it becomes a part of a wider debate and discussion, and ultimately the child gets back in the center and people think for the good of the children, for their future. Only if the child's future is secure can India's future be secure. Thank you very much.
The Federal is organizing the Tenkasi Marathon 2024 on March 24. This marathon is about raising awareness for 100% voting, supporting breast cancer awareness, and celebrating International Women's Day month. This event is sponsored by Scan.
Subscribe to the Federal's YouTube page for more news and updates.